evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council meeting of November 12th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciac, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Present.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland-McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall. Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Hubick.
I would like to excuse Councilmember McDougall, please.
Motion by Ms. Hubick, a second by Mr. Fantini to excuse Mr. McDougall. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, announcements and committee reports. Just a couple of quick ones from me. I'd like to thank everybody who helped out with what I believe was the first Veterans Day parade in a while yesterday. Thanks to Councilmember Fantini, who I think jumped in the last second to do some MC work, and also to PUD Commissioner Miller, who did some MC work over at Causland. So thanks to the staff for ensuring it was a safe event as well. Parks and Recreation special meeting Thursday, November 14th, 6 p.m. right here in Council Chambers. The subject is community pickleball. So that will be a fun, lively discussion, I'm sure. Everybody be civil, I know. And then Economic Development Stakeholders meeting Tuesday, November 19th. Just a reminder, that's at noon in Council Chambers as well. And in support of that meeting, there's still a community economic development survey that is online. The city is looking for your feedback on economic development opportunities and barriers in our city. We encourage the public to share their input and inform new economic development strategic plan and comprehensive plan policies. Survey, again, is available on our city's website. So please fill that out. I know now on to council reports. I know the planning committee actually met before this. We removed it because we didn't think there, but planning committee, we'll go there.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The planning committee met at 5 today, and we discussed item 7E on the agenda, which is a resolution about the countywide planning policies. So we'll talk about that obviously as part of the agenda. So no need to go into detail about that right now. And we talked a little bit about scheduling for the rest of the year, what the planning commission schedule is and what council schedule is. And that's it. It wasn't a super exciting meeting, but it was good that we had it.
All right. Port City Liaison Committee. Mr. Fantini.
The Port City Liaison Committee met on the 5th of November. A couple of the items discussed was, of course, the Clean Ports grant that the port received. There's 5 private partners involved with that. It's about $63.5 million in change, spread out over 2 grants from the EPA. 55 ports across the country participated in this, and so it was great that we were able to be chosen. A lot of the port's part will go to infrastructure improvements at the A dock and T dock. That'll be a big chunk of it. They're also got 2 fully electric workboats, and these will be some of the first in the area that we'll have. Skyline and Stabbards also are going to receive some infrastructure improvements, and one of the grants was about $1.5 million in planning for sustainable initiatives. Some of the items are 16 electric forklifts, but what I was most excited about was with what's going to be happening down at Stabbards, there's potential to bring another 50 jobs here to Anacortes, and there's a total possibility of about 70 jobs from that grant. We also talked about ADOC sewer, so there is a sewer line that went to nowhere, but we've been working with Public Works and the port for a solution on that. They are close on a solution, and the city will do the work on correcting that with reimbursement from the port. We also talked about Curtis Wharf improvements. Construction on paving and upgrading the dock has begun. The estimated completion on this will be in December of this year. Also discussed was the Marine Supply and Hardware Building. The Port Commission on their Thursday night meeting approved the surplus of Bike Spot, and that's going to allow the Housing Authority what they need in order to finish their design on the Olson building, and that surplus should be completed in the next couple of weeks. So if you see some changes down there. We had some further discussion around the event center, and that's moving forward with talk of the operational interlocal along with the construction interlocal, and that was our meeting.
Thank you. Any questions there? Okay, next up, Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
The Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee met last Wednesday. We met with representatives from the Housing Authority and the Family Center about their projects that are funded by our affordable housing sales tax. Had an in-depth discussion with them, working on nailing down their schedule for their existing projects and AFC's next project, and how much more funding AHA needs to complete their program project of the Olson building. AHA will also need an amendment to support their financing when it comes time for that. And then finally, we also had an attendee from Volunteers of America who had something to tell us about some tiny house style development, but we ran out of time to talk to him, so we'll schedule him for our next meeting.
Questions? Okay, next up is Economic Development Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Ubik.
Thank you. It was me in the meeting today with staff, Mr. Coleman and Ms. Snyder. The primary focus of the meeting was to go over the two things that you had mentioned earlier. So the survey that we're still accepting responses for, and the in-person conversation that we're getting ready to have on Tuesday the 19th at noon. Would love to have people sign up to join us next Tuesday. We're hoping that the conversation will last anywhere from 90 minutes to 120 minutes. It'll be in this room. It'll be facilitated with by someone from Western Washington. We've gotten about 200 results from the survey right now, and we're definitely looking to get more input from people. It is on the homepage of the website. It's on Anacortes. It's on the Facebook account for the PCED department. And then we are going to be looking to have another meeting soon to discuss some budget stuff. So more on that to come.
All right, thanks. Any questions there? Okay, Public Safety Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. We had our public safety meeting on November 5th. It was Ms. Hubig and Mr. Fantini, myself, and then Police and Fire, and obviously Mayor Miller. So Chief Floyd talked about the fact that we are currently down 7 positions, and the 6 of those are from the levy lid lift. The 1 position should be filled next month with one of our own retired council members, being that new person joining the police force, which is awesome. The ongoing challenge of figuring out where to house the new police academy for the Northwest Regional Academy. It's been moving around county to county, and now they've got it dialed into Arlington and should open in January or February. Makes it a lot easier for any recruits to do their training and not have to drive south of Seattle for multiple weeks. So hopefully that helps with some of our challenges filling those positions. It's a big deal to have to be gone for, an extended day, everyday training. In that vein, the police department and our HR department are working hand in hand to figure out how to up our recruiting for this next year, including college career fairs, public safety testing events, creating a video that can play. A lot of the recruitment testing is online, and so if we have a video, we can show that video before the test begins and just try to get the Anacortes Police Department out in front of as many potential candidates as possible. Moving on, we had Mr. Lunsford from the Parks Department come to us with a memo, and he wanted to start with the Public Safety Committee to talk about our trespass procedures. We had updated them in the last year. And had a graduated scale. So the first time you were given a ticket for trespassing, it was 7 days. The second time you had an offense, it would be 90 days. And the third time, it would be up to a year. The Parks Department, the library department and various, I think a couple other departments have talked, and having that graduated scale is causing more challenges than efficiency. And so we gave them the head nod to please provide that memo to the rest of council. And I think that has been provided, so you guys probably know about it. And then that will come to council in a future day. And then the last one, we had McDonald and Burbank with us, and they talked a little bit about the fire department. We have 3 openings at the fire department currently, with hopefully some offers going out shortly. And then they talked a little bit about their reorganizing. Some of the captains is transitioning to battalion chiefs, but I think that is going to be coming to us in the near future, and just kind of gave us a more in-depth reasoning as to why that is more efficient for things such as fire inspections, pre-fire plans, making sure that they can get all of the work that takes longer to accomplish done more efficiently. So that was nice to kind of get an explanation ahead before it comes to council about that. And I think that is pretty much all we discussed.
Mayor Miller?
Yeah, Mr. Fantini.
I just want to tag 2 items because I think there might be some people watching tonight. We also did talk about the intent of the spots on West 8th Street. There was a gentleman that had came before us mentioning that there's some difficulties, some struggles that the neighbors are having with spots up there. And so that's going to be looked into by city staff of what the intent is and whether or not there's something that needs to be changed in the parking up there. And then the other thing that was just interesting that I thought we talked about is the deer, feeding the deer came up in that meeting as well. And we currently do not have a law or statute that prohibits feeding the deer, but there is an ordinance that Bellingham has to prevent it, and that might be worth looking into, because I think whether you love the deer or hate the deer, everyone agrees that you shouldn't be feeding the deer. So,
Thank you. Anything else?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Councilmember Moulton and Councilmember Young and I will be hosting a community meeting Thursday, November 21, so a couple weeks from now, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the public library. Simply an open invitation to anybody who would like to participate. We usually do let it go the full 2 hours, and anybody can come in, have a cookie, and tell us what they think about any issues or business concerning the city of Anacortes.
All right. Thanks. Any other announcements or committee reports that I might have missed? Okay, we will move on to item 4, which is public comment. This is an opportunity any member of the public wishes to address the council on anything that's not on our agenda. Obviously, there will be opportunities to address the items on our agenda tonight, but we did receive 2 written public comments, one from Mr. Dennis Clark and another one from Chris and Janie Ackerman. First one was in reference to overlay program, and the other one was regards to the West End Park. So, all right, and so I always go to who signed up first, and I have 2 folks signed up, and it's on West 6th Street Park. And first up is Zua Mu. And okay, so you're going to yield your position in the lineup to Linda Martin, who also the topic is West 6th Street Park. And I think you know the drill that you got to say your name again for the record and city you live in.
There we go. Linda Martin, Anacortes. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and audience, I am honored to speak with you tonight on behalf of some residents who don't often have a voice in our community, namely our children. I'm here today to talk with you about the promised park on city-owned property on West 6th Street. I know it's not the most pressing item on your long list of responsibilities and agendas, but it matters to our community, particularly to our children. And today, I am presenting you with a petition signed in just a couple of days by over 140 neighbors who live in Precinct 222. We're asking that the park be built in 2025 and that you listen to the voices, big and small, in our community. We understand that it is on the capital facilities plan for 2026, but after listening to council questions about funding for this project, it appears that funding, even in 2026, has yet to be determined, and it is therefore likely that this promised park will once again slide to the bottom of the priorities list. To the best of our knowledge, the park on West 6th Street has been promised for at least 9 years, and some residents tell us that it has really been about 20 years that children have been promised a place to play. We are willing to work with you to revisit the Parks Department priorities so that this long-awaited park will be realized next year. One suggestion might be that the Parks Commission and Parks Department redirect the funds for the sand volleyball court planned for Storbeck Park in favor of a playground for our children in an area that is lacking such amenities, particularly since the sand volleyball court in our climate will only be usable for a few months in the year. We plan to visit with the Parks Commission when they meet on Thursday and to ask them to reevaluate the priorities for their budget. There are also several local organizations that we have contacted and who will consider helping financially with this project. Please listen to the voices of your constituents, including those who are the youngest among us, and use your influence to ask the Parks Department to reevaluate their priorities and to delay this promised playground no longer. Let's work together and all stand up for the children of our community. Thank you very much. And here's the petition, 143, I think,
Okay.
plus some drawings from children.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, council's not finished with the budget, and they will have the opportunity to set those priorities, as that's their main role. So thank you for that. Suamu, do you want to? Yeah, okay. Topic is West 6th Street Park. Just make sure the light's on.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Shuan Mu, Anacortes. Miss Martin just summarized very well. And a couple of weeks ago, Halloween night, the weather wasn't great, just like tonight. Guess how many children going through our neighborhood? Mr. Fantini probably will tell you over 100. I even had about 50 at the end of the cul-de-sac and the German Shepherd barking nonstoply. And I ended up having only 5 candies left. So we do have a lot of children. Think about this park was promised to the residents over 20 years ago. And the children 20 years ago now are in their 20s and the 30s, not able to use the park. Think about over 100 children in this neighborhood, Ward 3 and the Precinct 222. I'm just checking my time. And the people have spoken that they would like to have a park not delayed further now. And Ms. Martin also outlaid for you, there are other organizations may be interested in sharing the funding to build this park. So let's work together, and I think just for a few hours, you have 143 neighbors, unique addresses from 2nd Street all the way to Rockridge Parkway. If you look at how kids play on Rockridge Parkway, the park area, riding bicycles downhill, going through bumps, and without helmets is very dangerous. So kids are very excited for this park, and we thank you for your service, and we thank you for representing the interest of the citizens of Anacortes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I don't have anybody else signed up, but does anybody else want to address the council on anything that's not on our agenda tonight? Okay, come on up. Yeah, but just make sure the light's on.
There we go. My name's Margaret Graham, and I'm a fairly recent resident to Anacortes. I moved here about 1.5 years ago, and I happen to live right across the street from that vacant lot that's been promised to be a park. My front window looks right out at it, and we enjoy watching the trees across the way change their colors. We enjoy seeing the kids playing, throwing a football this time of year, throwing a softball during baseball season, the people with their dogs doing the check-a-ball. It's a widely used lot that really could benefit from being turned into a park. And like I said, I've only been here a short while, but I think the neighborhood would really appreciate you moving a little more quickly on this project and putting a park in. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your input. Anybody else? Okay, I don't have anybody online. All right, I will move on to our consent agenda, items 5A through D. Council.
Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. Make a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D.
Second.
Yeah, motion by Ms. Hubick, a second by Ms. Moulton to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to other business, we've got items 6A through E. First item is 6A, Community Action of Skagit County. This is a presentation, and I think Mr. Coleman will introduce our guests that we know.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. John Coleman, Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development. So tonight, we're going to have a presentation from Community Action. As I'm sure the Council is well aware, that Council provides money annually for Community Action to operate their Anacortes office. And as part of that, there's an expectation for them to present to the Council quarterly about the progress of the Anacortes Resource Center. So today, Dulce Vasquez Cruz is going to present about the Resource Center. She's the Resource Center manager. And we also have Sandy Finney, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for Community Action, that's going to also talk to Council about their 2025 plans. So, Dulce.
All right, well, welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, City Council members and Mayor. As John said, I'm the Resource Center manager, and I oversee our Mount Vernon Resource Center and our Anacortes Resource Center. So staff updates, Gina exited our Anacortes Resource Center on the 1st of November, but we wish her well in her future endeavors, and we welcome Diana Plurd, who's taking over as Resource Coordinator. She brings 2 years of experience from our Mount Vernon Resource Center. And she's well-versed in resource navigation, and she'll be trained up on all things Anacortes. And she's also carrying a caseload for a specific number of clients here in Anacortes that need that extra support in resource navigation and accessing services. So we recently had, about a month ago or a month and a half ago, we had a household come into our Anacortes Resource Center, and they were having a really hard time finding a place that they are able to afford with their income. So Gina at the time, she worked really closely with that household, and we ended up finding out that they had stable housing in their home state. So we were able to help this household mediate between family members over at their home state and help them travel over there. We were able to fund some gas vouchers for them to make that safe travel. And now they're stably housed right now. So we're super excited to be in Anacortes, and we continue to, like I mentioned earlier, Diana is carrying a caseload for a certain number of clients here in Anacortes. And again, it's to mediate between finding stable housing. Maybe it's starting right at, getting that self-identifying documentation or finding employment, whatever it might be. Diana's working with a certain number of folks here in Anacortes. And we have had 5 amazing volunteers. I know that number's a little fluctuating by now, but they've been in the office helping us greet clients, answer the phones, help us get organized, and we realize that they bring a really good foundation to our Anacortes Resource Center, and we want to expand our services a lot more. And by expanding that, we're hoping to hire a part-time service screener who will be manning the front and answering the phones and greeting clients. And they will also be supporting Diana with some of the duties on the caseload. And we're opening that position. It is open right now. So we've been conducting some interviews, and we are hoping to keep some of our volunteers still engaged with community action and helping our mission. And we will be having our street outreach team in rotation this coming week, and they'll be out in our resource center at least twice a week, and we're hoping to have some consistency with that program. And that part-time service screener that I mentioned earlier, they will be trained on scheduling energy appointments. They will be trained on processing all of their documents and making sure that there's a connection between our Anacortes office and our Mount Vernon office without having anyone travel to Mount Vernon to deliver any documents. So they'll be that middle person. And we still have our WIC office, or WIC person there. And these are some of the services that we offered in Anacortes. I do want to let you know that the number for our WIC services is incorrect on this slide. It's a lot more than 15 services that we've offered. They use a different database than we do at the agency. And I'll make sure that during our 4th quarter report, we'll get an accurate number for our WIC clients. But we've seen an impact, and for quarter 2 and 3, from January through September, we have seen 16 new households receive care coordination services, which are those services that Diana's offering, that resource navigation and ongoing services. And we have 36 people that have accessed our street outreach program. And we have 628 Anacortes residents who have received services from a resource center. Directly from our Anacortes Resource Center, it's 115 from January through September. And 219 received energy assistance. And 47 received senior or disabled volunteer services. Oh, let me introduce to you Sandy. Oh, any questions for me?
Any questions at this point?
Mayor
Mr. Walters?
On the last slide there, why the number of Anacortes residents who are not receiving service from the Anacortes Resource Center?
We have some folks that go to our Mount Vernon office, and they travel to our Mount Vernon office hoping that they're going to receive the services there without knowing that our resource center in Anacortes exists. So that's when we make sure to connect. Whenever they go to our Mount Vernon office, we connect them to our office in Anacortes and make sure that they don't have to travel to Mount Vernon to receive services. And so any service that we offer in Mount Vernon, we track it for our Mount Vernon office. And if they travel to Anacortes, then we track it for our Anacortes office.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
We're good?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I appreciate Dulce doing all the work to work with all of our resource centers to make sure that we're delivering consistent service. It's one of the big challenges that we've seen over the past year is making sure that we're offering high quality and consistent and kind of standardized services across our resource centers. It's been a challenge, but we've made huge headway thanks to Dulce's work and some really good communication among our resource centers. I did want to include some demographics because I thought folks might be interested in seeing them. Sorry, I should introduce myself. Sandy Finney, Chief Strategy Officer. When I pulled some data, I thought it was interesting to look at the number of people that we serve in Anacortes. A little over 50% are at 100% of the federal poverty line. 32.4% are seniors, pretty significant, that doesn't surprise me. 24% are disabled. And then I thought this was interesting too to see that 20% were homeowners, 22% are unhoused, 44% are renters, and the remainder are unknown. And then additionally, on the slide, these numbers are from 2023. 1,201 Anacortes residents were served during the calendar year 2023. And that page is taken directly from our impact report, which if you can find online at our website, communityactionskagit.org, and there's a lot of good information there about the general impact of community action across the county. I also wanted to draw attention to another publication that recently came out, which is our community needs assessment. As a community action agency, we're required to do a community needs assessment once every 3 years, at least once every 3 years, that includes input from staff, community members, community partners, clients as well. And so worked with partners and a lot of staff, board members to pull this together. And it includes county and agency demographics. So it's interesting to see a lot of the data that's in there that compares county data with agency data. Needs analysis of all the domains of poverty, which are essentially the social determinants of health. There's a lot of customer input and quotes, and lots of input from staff, community partners, and recommendations for where we see the key needs moving forward. The key findings are, not surprisingly, affordable housing and shelter options, access to mental and behavioral health, family-sustaining jobs, and affordable childcare. And those came across not only from our own research, but looking at research that partner organizations have done across the county as well. What's really important, though, is also to keep on the radar some things like food access, which didn't necessarily rise to the top, but we know it's a major, major need in the county, especially with We Feed Washington going away next year as well. So it's really important to make sure that we continue to offer food access for families. I also wanted to draw attention to some of the more systemic issues that came up across all of the research that we looked at. One of them was better equity and access to services, and sort of without exception, what we heard from our own staff, board members, and then partner reports was we need better equity and access to services. And so it's one of the reasons why we're so happy to be here in Anacortes, providing better access to services here and we're trying to build that up. Obviously, more respect and dignity for people and undervalued communities, and more coordinated information about resources. Again, we heard this from not only our own staff and board members, but also from community partners around the county, and we hope to be a part of connecting and communicating as much as we can. This community needs assessment is on our website. You can access it there if you're interested. All right. And next, I wanted to first thank the City of Anacortes again for your support of the Anacortes Resource Center. We're very excited that we've been able to get up and running, and our numbers have ramped up, which we're pretty excited about. So what we didn't see in Dulce's presentation is if we look at it from quarter to quarter, our numbers are increasing, and I think that's going to continue to happen as Dulce mentioned, as the word gets out that we are here, and as our customer service continues to improve, making sure that we're offering the same services at all our resource centers, and as we staff up as well, recognizing that we're adjusting our staffing structure to make sure that we can better serve the needs of the community here. So I would like to request support, continued support again this year at the same level that we requested last year. The first is for the Anacortes Resource Center, also continued support for food boxes for seniors, and continued support for senior and disabled volunteer services. In the past, those requests were made separately. This year, we're just making them together. It seems simpler that way. We're leaving the request at the same level. We do recognize that there are budget challenges across the board for ourselves as well. I did want to make sure that you knew that Mr. Coleman has the letter of request. I mentioned in there the adjustments that would be made to staffing and things like that. There's also a budget in there. The request that we've made to the city of Anacortes makes up about half of what would cover the costs of the resource center. The other half is covered by braided funding, which includes things like Puget Sound Energy, basic food and education, WASDOT, foundational community supports, and a number of other smaller donations that we get specifically to support Anacortes and funding both WIC and children. So that's where that's the breakdown, is half and half. So we would very much appreciate continued support for the Anacortes Resource Center. We appreciate your support already, and of course we'll continue to let you know as things ramp up with our numbers, and I'm happy to answer any more questions you have.
All right. Any questions?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I thought it was interesting as well that there's a lot of people traveling off island to get services that are available for them here. And I'm just wondering, I noticed that there's like a street outreach program or an outreach street program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And is that something that will help with that? Do we expect the word to get out even more? Is there anything more that we can do as a council other than give money to help get the word out there? Or?
As far as street outreach, that's not so much marketing, that's actually working with the unhoused community. And so I think that, as Dulce mentioned, one of the things we're going to be doing is having a staff member be here twice a week during lobby, and have lobby hours, just as we do in Mount Vernon, which I believe they do 4 days a week. Doing the same thing here in Anacortes, I think, will help us serve more people here. So that's one thing that we can do. The other thing is there's other services that we offer that aren't here yet. So for example, people who might be getting employment services are not able to be seen here yet because of our staffing limitations, essentially. So there's things like that where we might not ever be able to get 100% of Anacortes residents coming here because there's more services there, but we can do our best to at least make the connections. As far as getting the word out, I think our next step is, once we staff up and once we make sure that we have the standardized services around the county, that we need to have a communications plan. And it's already on our 2025 work plan to come up with a communications plan to make sure we're getting the word out more intentionally. So we are working on that. As far as what the council can do, I don't have an answer for that, but continuing to have us present and make sure people know about the services that we can offer is probably the best that we can ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you to Dulce and Sandy for being here, and I really do appreciate these quarterly reports. I think they're very helpful to us in the community. And I am a board member of Community Action, which I'm very glad to be. Just wanted to mention that as well. And I appreciate the impact report, the community needs assessment, and also that the city is providing half your funding, but you're coming up with the other half through various other means, which means a lot that you're able to do that, and that people are supporting you and organizations are supporting you in that way. I think that's really important as well. So thanks so much for serving our local people and doing it here. It's really a huge benefit to our community.
Thank you.
Mr. Young, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Miller. I just wanted to comment that community action, how much of a fan I am of community action. The work is just extraordinary. The reach and, the ability to make use of limited funds for the most good. I always appreciate that about you. And what I also like is the fact that the Anacortes office is really growing. I think that the community is becoming aware of your presence and also the work that you're doing not just here in Anacortes, but scattered over. So, sometimes those benefits to Anacortes, which is incredibly important, but it's also good to know just the larger impact of the work that you're doing. And I think that the more Anacortes citizens of means know about it, the more we'll be able to try to begin to address some of the big holes left in community need for agencies such as yourself and others that serve those that are most in need. And I really appreciate that. We have the holiday seasons gearing up and so many celebrations by many cultures. And I just appreciate the work that you do. And I'm personally thankful that you're there doing that. And I'm making sure that I tell everybody about you as well as the Anacortes Family Center about the work that's being done here at Anacortes. So thank you very much.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton?
I forgot to mention one thing. As the weather gets colder, I know you administer an energy assistance program for income qualified people. Is there a date in which that we know that begins, that people can apply for that kind of assistance?
Yes, actually, I believe they can apply now. For seniors, it began in October, and so October is open for seniors, and November it's now open for everybody else to apply for that. And there is LIHEAP assistance, PSE, Cascade Natural Gas, and we encourage everybody to apply. It does get busy, but our team is actually it's the best in the state at getting the money out, and we're very proud of that. It's pretty exciting. We want to try to help as many people as we can.
That's fantastic. And also with that, so do people need to come into the office to do that?
What's really exciting is now they can come into our Anacortes office to schedule the appointment. At this point, we're trying to work out the details of, they may have to go into Mount Vernon to deliver documents. No, they don't have to deliver documents. No, they can deliver documents here. Sorry, she's the expert. Yeah. But yeah, they can schedule an appointment. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. And then also tagging onto that, a reminder that the city of Anacortes, we have our discounted utility program for income qualified people. So anyone who's listening or who knows someone, reach out to the city staff to see if you qualify for that as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walters?
And I think that there's probably more work that we could do here at the city to help promote your location. And you do have an excellent location in downtown. Maybe we can do some brainstorming in the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee about some of the ways that we can connect you. I'm kind of assuming that a lot of people that need these services are not necessarily watching city council meetings, but they may be reading the senior center newsletter, for which you have had and usually do have announcements in there. But some of the people that really need help maybe have never been to the senior center. Mm-hmm. I mean, the needs of seniors were one of the primary motivators, I think, for getting the support for you guys to open an office here to begin with. And it can be very difficult to reach some of those people that aren't engaged or maybe can't become engaged, because of their situation. But let's talk about it, and let's brainstorm some additional ideas and see what else we can do.
Absolutely. I'd also love to, in addition to the senior center, I'd also love to be more engaged with the school district as well, and do some intentional outreach with the school district to make sure that they know supporting families is pretty important.
And it's potentially maybe the perfect venue for a utility bill insert. We do those from time to time, and they have ever declining utility, right? Because people aren't getting physical utility bills, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of seniors still are. Yeah. And so maybe that's the perfect demographic to receive that kind of stuff. And also, very clearly, you can't tell people once. We've got to tell people over and over and over again. Maybe they don't need the service right away, but they need to be aware of it in order to know to go there when they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Gula-McGrath?
Thank you, and thank you for both of your work and the organization. I mean, everyone's kind of said it, and being on the HACS committee, I've had an opportunity to get to know you guys better. So thank you. It's really an important work you guys are doing. My one question, because since we're doing budget after this, is it says you would like to request continued support this year at the same level requested as last year. Did we fully fund you at your requested amount last year?
Not quite fully.
Okay.
It was pretty close, but not quite fully. So the exact numbers that were on the original request last year was $74,520 to support the Anacortes Resource Center, which I think was funded at $66,000, so about $8,000 less than that. And then I added on the $5,000 for senior and disabled services and $5,000 for food distribution center, which we have gotten. And the food distribution center is actually specifically for the senior food boxes that come to seniors in Anacortes.
Okay, that's helpful just to know kind of where.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Good, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, this is open for public. Any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Don't have anybody online? Okay, we will, thank you very much. Appreciate you all coming out again. And we will move on to item 6B. This is Anacortes Alerts, Mass Notification System, and this is a presentation. And Ms. Shu will present this one.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the audience. Tonight, we're very pleased to introduce the city's new mass notification system. The intention of the new system is to improve the residents' experience, streamline our ability to communicate, and also to align with the community's needs for engagement. So how does it work? Anacortes now is using Civic Plus mass notification system to send emergency alerts and other notifications. People are able to subscribe to receive emergency alerts or to receive notifications by phone, by text, and or email. So we're going to talk about a couple different ways that people are able to subscribe. So people are able to personalize an alert subscription by just going to the city's website, and I'll just briefly bring you there. So this is the city's alert and notification website. And here people are able to register to only receive emergency messages from the city, or they can even opt into other notification systems that they are interested in receiving. And we'll go through those keywords. There is also a mobile app available that is available both through on Google and the App Store. And people here can follow these green buttons to sign up or to modify or unsubscribe from the system. So one of the things that we thought was very important is when we were setting the system up that we wanted to ensure that there was a local phone number. So the phone number, and we would encourage people to whitelist this number, but if you're receiving a notice through the Anacortes Alerts, it will always come from this phone number, 360-585-0390. And that can send messages over landline and also through text messages. So we are encouraging people to whitelist that. I know that sometimes there are emergency notifications that come out from other agencies that come from an area code that is not familiar to us, and so that was very important as we were setting this up.
And those folks who don't have an IT division working for them, whitelist means allow it to come through, not
yes.
block it.
So, or not to block that number too. Yes. Then the other option is people can subscribe just to keywords. So by texting 38276, if you type in the word Anacortes, that will automatically sign you up for any emergency alerts with the city. We also have multiple other keywords that you can use to subscribe. So if you're only interested in the Anacortes comp plan, you can text that same keyword, to any one of these, you can type any of these keywords to 38276, and you will automatically be enrolled in text messaging for those specific items. The list continues here as well. So these are other keywords that have already been set up so you can subscribe to any of those items simply by texting the keyword or the keyword to 38276. You could also sign up through a mobile app. And so if you go to My Alerts, this is what it will look like, Connexus Inc. And you can sign up to have these alerts directly come through your mobile app. The city is still utilizing the Notify Me system. This was the previous way that people signed up for and received notices. But this will be for a much limited audience, so it will be specifically now for bid postings, calendar events, and employment opportunities. We are trying to transition people to the Civic Plus mass notification system. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you, Ms. Shu. I think this is a great resource. And I'm wondering if we downloaded the app from Google Play, would we be able to choose, would we get everything? Or is there a way?
Yes, and so that's a great thing. So I'm showing you kind of the shortcut just for text by typing and texting that keyword in. But if you follow the link here and say that you want to sign up, from here you add your first name, your last name, what your preferred method of communication is, whether you want to be email, voicemail, text. You can choose which language you would like to have the message arrive in. There are over 60 languages that we're able to support. And you can also, we're asking people to put their current location or their home location. This will allow us to be able to specifically identify if we are moving into a snow route area that is only in this particular neighborhood, we're able to then go in and identify specific geographic areas. So on the back end, we will be tying into our utility billing customer information. This will also be a way that we're going to be notifying specific neighborhoods if there was ever to be a fiber outage in an area and they're a customer of ours, that we'll be able to reach out to them this way. So this is a really good resource for people to be able to go in and identify. I'm getting down far enough now. So you're able to specifically, just by going to that link, identify which of the particular groups that you want to receive information on.
Thank you. That's super helpful. You might not be done. I'm sorry if I interrupted.
That's fine.
So I am signed up for a bunch of Notify Me categories already that I receive emails for. Is that going away?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So we have automatically moved people from the Notify Me and moved them over to the mass notification system. So anybody that is already previously enrolled in the Notify Me at 8 p.m. tonight will be receiving an email announcing that we have moved to this mass notification system. So we're trying to help people to learn how they can make this transition to really help to keep them informed as well.
Miller.
Ms. Hubick?
I'd just like to make a quick little note. So I just went through the website and signed up for it. So it will also send you a confirmation email asking you to put in a 6-digit code. Mine ended up in my spam folder. So anybody that is signed up for Notify Me should probably check their spam folders after 8 o'clock tonight as well, just in case.
Thank you. Good reminder.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Well, I think this system has a lot of potential. I also understand that it's not very expensive, somewhere in the order of $8,000 a year or something like that, which is, I think, well worth it for the capacity that it offers us. If you're interested in a little bit of feedback, I think we have too many categories. I want to know about the flash flood and the dust storm, and probably will never differentiate between the two. Also, like police and fire, I think I would always want. I realize these correspond to our departments, but I think that the average citizen out there is less interested in distinguishing between those, and we do want them to get signed up, and especially signed up, I think, with their address, because that's where the real power of this lies. If we could send out a text notification to a neighborhood and saying your street's getting torn up for, you know, this project that's happening, and contractor just left and your water's turned off, that kind of thing would be very helpful, but it's not going to work if people don't put in their addresses. I would really like to be able to use the system for that feature, but I guess I'm concerned a little bit. It won't work if they don't put in their address, and it won't work if they don't check the right box.
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment because we will be tying in the backside to our utility billing database. And so we'll be able to identify information there that will be able to allow us to identify a certain neighborhood and be able to send notices out based on the information that we have within the backside of the utility billing. So we do have some information and ability to do that on an emergent basis. We would prefer that people sign up and do provide that information, but we do have a kind of back way if we need to get to people, and we think that will be very important. So,
at the same time, there's the service offered by Skagit 911. Is it correct that we need to keep telling people to sign up for both of these services? And the city used to offer the Nixle service. I don't think that's been used in a while. Is that gone now?
We no longer offer the Nixle service.
Okay.
This is the equivalent of a replacement for that. Yes, we would encourage people to continue to sign up for Code Red.
Okay. And then one other thing. I think the efficiency and efficacy of the system is improved if we have template messages ready to go at all times, so that we can be sure to communicate all the right information, especially in an emergent situation. It can be difficult to do that and to craft the right message. So I assume the system supports, you know, templates that can be pre-populated for various conditions and then used.
I can't say enough about the backside and the efficiency, about how easy it is to use as an end user. For example, and I hope I don't have to send this out, but if there were to be a fiber outage, I would be able to send a notification that simultaneously could hit our website, the city's fiber's Facebook page, and our email customers. I can identify where that is. And yes, there are templates that can be prepared in advance to be able to do that. So
Perfect.
we have 4 staff that are super administrators. They've been trained in how to use this. And then people within different departments have access to different areas depending on their area of specialty, so that we can make sure that we're very consistent in the messaging that we're providing for each department.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
I had just a question. First of all, I applaud the effort in trying to be more transparent and available with what's happening at the city. The Notify Me system, while was a great first step, I feel like I'm always getting a meeting is canceled notice, or I feel like there's a lot of things that haven't worked the way they're supposed to, at least for me, with that. But I really think that this is a good next step. Question as far as I saw some of the areas where like who decides what an alert is. So for instance, obviously, like I can guess what the police and fire alerts would be, right? They would be things that would be happening, like a fire or, you know, a car chase, if those ever happen in Anacortes. But what about like council updates? Who kind of decides? Like for instance, would there be something that goes out that says, hey, there's a pickleball meeting that's happening, or hey, we who determines that?
And I think that a lot of that, like the pickleball, that will be something that the Parks Department is doing. There's a a keyword Anacortes Council, so people can sign up for anything related to Anacortes City Council. There's one that's Anacortes, I want to say it's Anacortes Meetings.
Would it be like when we have
Yes.
our public hearings? Like, would that be an alert that people would know about, or?
Yes, we could set it up that way, yes.
Yeah, I think it's tied in the same way you get alerts when, hey, there's been a change to the council agenda or an updated the meeting, or when the council agenda gets posted. I'm sure it ties into that system, or can.
And then when you talk about, like, I think this is great for the fiber, and we're going to be able to kind of cross-reference our utility bills with this text message. So people who have fiber, will they automatically be signed up to receive fiber, or they still have to opt in?
We're encouraging people to sign up for it, but if we are having some type of outage, if we need to have a boil water, if we are having a road that's closed, we'll be able to push that out from gathering information that was in the utility bill.
So we can
billing
use that
system.
without them having to necessarily opt in?
Yes. Our preference is that if people are wanting to have something specific about Anacortes events or Anacortes fiber internet, that they are going to be signing up for that. But we can override that in emergency situations to get information out.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
So you anticipate being able to match up phone numbers, which we largely don't have when people sign up for this, to their utility bills, their names and addresses that we do have?
What we're going to be able to do is then we can use a GIS mapping system and to identify specific areas or all of the city of Anacortes, and then within that identify who is a utility bill holder specific to water, specific to fiber, and then be able to only notify those people.
And I thought I understood from discussion in the fiber committee that this system might have some ability to send notifications even if you're not signed up?
Yes, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that if we have a person who is a utility, fiber utility customer, that we're going to be able to take that information from the utility billing database and reach out to those specific customers within a specific geographic area. So we have some backside information. That's not going to automatically sign them up for anything Anacortes fiber internet. That's only, when we would be using that to identify, we have a maintenance window from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. this morning.
Okay. I went to Yellowstone a couple weeks ago. There wasn't really good cell service, but then when I came back into cell service, I swear to God, I got a whole lot of text messages from various political parties interested in some donations in advance of the election. I think, which was pretty shocking in the middle of national park. I think there's some danger here to have too many texts. The Notify Me system was kind of like that. I mean, I must have hundreds of Notify Me emails. And especially because of the way they were formatted, it was pretty difficult to easily at a glance read through them and filter them. I'm hopeful that this system will be different and that the text messages won't have like extraneous words or formatting, and that they can be read pretty quickly at a glance. But still, if there are too many, like every council meeting or every event or those kinds of things, I think it could quickly get out of hand and become more chaff and not enough wheat.
So people have the opportunity to opt in and opt out of those items. And if it's too much, I know that the system really is very helpful in walking you through doing an alert. And if it's over a certain number of characters, it will give you a link to an email address where you can read the whole message if it has to be longer than 300 characters or something. I'm making that amount up, but it's a pretty tried and true system. I've been really impressed as we've been working through the implementation process. So
Okay.
Open to your feedback as we implement it further.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I would just concur the Notify Me things, because it would be really nice to just look at it and kind of know what's going on instead of this can be found here, whatever. Like there's a lot. So yeah, just kind of tagging on to Mr. Walters' comment, if it's just, if there's any way to just have like the nugget of information that you can just look at and it's there, that would be fabulous.
We'll use that as training opportunities with our staff.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
I'm guessing this is probably in use by other municipalities. Do we know of any others that are using this system, and if they've found any problems or improvements or things that we should be aware of as we kind of get started?
Many entities are using this. So the company, the overarching company, is Civic Plus. Civic Plus is who we do our website with, who we do our meetings with, who we do our emergency notifications with. So it's most cities that are using Civic Plus for their websites, and the majority in the United States and even Canada are using this system or transitioning to this system.
Have they provided some recommendations around hey, this is a great way to get started with not receiving too many messages, or are there, I guess what I'm saying is, since there's a lot of them using it, have we learned anything from those that are?
They have a great website internally for staff to use as a help center. They have access to a lot of different templates and things that we can look at. So I think that it's tried and true. We'll probably run into some hiccups, and then we'll continue to get better with it. This is really intended just to help the community be aware that this is a new service that we're offering, and we're moving away from the Notify Me system.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Members of the public still here? Want to comment on this one? Okay, I will move on then to item 6C, and 6C is ordinance 4091, access Anacortes fiber internet limited tax general obligation bond issue. It's a discussion item with possible action. Mr. Hoagland.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. Tonight's second read for ordinance 4091. This would authorize a general obligation bond issue for up to $13.5 million with a maximum interest rate of 5.5%. So right now the proceeds are shaping up to look like we'll be requesting $12.5 million, and the interest rates right after the election, they jumped up a little bit, and then a couple of days later came back down a little bit. So they actually, at this point, the interest rates are slightly more favorable than they were before the election. So both Justin and Alice are remoted into the meeting. If you have questions for the underwriter or bond attorney, and I believe Ms. Yu has some additional information to review that council had requested last week.
All right.
So I thought this might be a good opportunity for us to just go over the fiber financials and the financing options, but then also to spend a little time looking backwards about how did we get to the point of having a fiber optic internet service in Anacortes. One of the specific questions that had come up last week had to do with what is the city's debt capacity. And both Alice and Justin are on the line with us, so if you have specific questions, they're here to help explain this. But it basically, the last time that we went to bond in 2009, we had 4.7% debt capacity that was used, and now we'll have 12.9%. And we've actually reduced the percent of voted and non-voted debt capacity from 9.1% to 8.3%, as our assessed valuation certainly has grown since then. So I would invite both Alice and Justin to further explain that.
Alice and Justin, you want to jump in?
Sure. So although the percentage went down, the growth in assessed value, actually there's more debt capacity. From 2009, there was 43 million of debt capacity available. Now there's going to be about 81 million of debt capacity available. It's just that 12 million cuts into that 81%. And so of that 81 million, about 13% of that is used.
Right. The assessed value drives the debt capacity calculation for state law purposes. And so what has also happened since 2009 is the city has actually paid off all of its other outstanding general obligation debt. And so that's, quite nice. It puts you in a very good position. And if you look just above the percentages that were just highlighted, you do have remaining $81 million worth of debt capacity, whereas back in 2009, you only had 43 million. And so that, is sitting there as a cushion for emergencies that might come up or future projects that you might plan for. But you're using a very, very small piece of the overall debt capacity available to the city under law.
Thank you.
Miller?
Mr. Walters.
And that 12.9% looks like is after issuance of this bond, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, without issuance of this bond, you would be sitting at zero.
Thank you. I appreciate you going through that, both Justin and Alice. So looking back, I thought it'd be helpful just to briefly go through, looking back in time to 2019 when we established the business plan goals for this idea of a fiber optic internet service. The things that we decided is that we need to be able to deliver high-speed residential and business internet services at competitive prices throughout the community. Doing that with excellent customer service. Our business plan required that we needed to achieve at least a market share of 35% for it to be a viable business option for us. That we were going to pay for our construction liabilities or loans through subscriber revenue and achieve our payback on our construction investment in 15 to 20 years. Become cash flow positive in 2 to 3 years and spur both local business development and economic growth. I think that we're doing a great job on all of those items, and that felt like a big stretch when we put together those business plan goals. So then we came up with a summary about how we're actually going to do that. So we made the decision to become our own internet service provider rather than using a third-party outside source to do that. That we're going to do it inside, and that we are only going to be looking at high-speed internet service, but we would investigate phone and TV partnerships. At this point, we have not further explored that, and it seems to be working well for us. We have dark fiber leases that are available for additional revenue that the community is participating in, and that we were going to take 1 year to pass 1,000 premises in low to build or construct cost neighborhoods. So looking primarily at aerial installation. And then at that point, if we were successful, we would come back to City Council and say, is this something that we could continue to expand and grow the footprint? So when we initially started, we thought we would need 4 employees during that trial period and expand to 6 or 7 staff members since then. We have done that. We also became cash flow positive in year 2 and are continuing to have this conversation now about the long-term debt service. And we have more than achieved the 35% market share. So just to give an overview of our demand for service. At the end of business today, we had 2,558 customers in service, and we have 3,694 orders. So a lot more customers still waiting to get into service. But what I really want to point out to you is this take rate. So in the areas where we currently are offering service, we are far exceeding the 35% market share that we needed to have this business be successful. We're actually achieving 51, almost 52% market share. These other customers are direct internet access or dark fiber customers that we've been able to grow upon, in addition to our residential and commercial customers. So we have over $22 million in network construction costs that will for the entire project. 18.5% or $18.5 million has currently been expended, and we expect that between this month and December of next year that we'll have about another $3.5 million. So I feel really proud of the work that we're doing, in that we're looking at $12 million to cover the costs of a $22 million project that we have been able to put into place. So let's look at the financial projections for 2025. We're projecting over $2.1 million in revenue. Our operating expenses are $1.487 million. We'll be able to receive the remaining $225,000 in grant proceeds. And we have about $1.8 million left for the network construction for the work that is currently underway right now. So at the end of 2025, we'll have a general fund draw. We'll take from the general fund and the grant proceeds $860,000 next year. In 2026, the general fund draw drops down to $246,000. You'll see that there is not what we're calling the network construction, but the network installation. So this will be the cost associated with making those final connections to the customer from the street. We are able to make our debt service at $762,000 in 2026 with a general fund draw of $246,000. What's really exciting is that by 2027, we become completely cash flow positive. That when we look at the revenue, our operating expenses, the network installation costs, and our debt service, we're going to be able to contribute back to the general fund $222,000. Excuse me. So with the $12 million bond, $6.95 million of that will be going to repay the interfund loans that we have through the ER&R, I have ERP on my mind, from our ER&R accounts and also from the water account. The remaining $5.05 million will go back into the general fund. Some of that will be used to pay the remaining costs associated with the project build out. And then the $500,000, the $12.5 million is to pay for the interest costs in 2025 So this is just
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Before we move on to the bond parameters here, so you're showing there's essentially $5 additional million after the refund of our internal interfund loan. And the bond ordinance would allow us to go even higher than this, would allow us to go up to 13.5. So I'm going to be looking for some explanation as to why we need that capacity there. But on your prior slides here, do you show that additional $5 million?
So what I'm showing is the general fund draw, like in 2025 of $860,000, and in 2026 of $246,000. That is funds as part of the bond proceeds that we think will be used for that.
Right. So that's money that's got to come out of the general fund to pay for our projected fiber expenses. That is a sum of $1 million. So where's that $5 million going?
The $5 million.
$5 million there
is
on that
going
slide.
back into the general fund. Some will pay for the construction costs, and some will pay back some of the general fund expenses that have helped to build the network up to this point.
So it will just go into our general fund reserve? Is that
Well, we don't really have a reserve. The general fund is nearly broke. So this will get those operating reserves. I mean, I'm using, I guess, harsh language. This was planned, but the general fund, those operating funds for the general fund need to be built back up. So this $5 million, part of it is being used to pay back what was spent this year, and then part of that will be available for next year. So it will go into general fund reserves from an accounting sense, but it's getting those funds back up to an operating level where we can continue just general operations out of that general fund.
Well, I guess I don't quite follow that, because the general fund is currently at its current level supporting the things it needs to support, right? Because
so this
have we
year's-
already expended the 6.95 interfund loan? That 6.95 million interfund loan, which
Yes.
covered the 4.5 line of credit, but also some additional money.
Right.
Hasn't that already been expended on the fiber project?
That has been expended. There are other expenses out of the general fund that we budgeted to pay for with FEMA replacement monies. That money is still outstanding. So the money coming in from this bond issue will be able to cover some of those shortfalls that FEMA money, lack of FEMA money is creating. We would have to, without this, effectively have to go out and get another line of credit or some other type of commercial loan to provide that cash flow to get us through year end.
Okay, so those are one-time expenses that we expected to be covered, and we still expect, right, to be covered
Correct.
by
Yes.
FEMA reimbursements?
Yes.
And what does that FEMA reimbursement amount to?
Pardon?
What does the expected FEMA reimbursement amount to?
It's in excess of $4 million, and I don't remember if it's 4 point.
Yeah, I'll help you. I mean,
Please.
it's a little bit of a moving target because still in negotiations with FEMA about what is the replacement value of the 2021 disaster that happened, and it's an alternative project. And you all saw the letter that I sent to Congressman Larson to try to get them moving on that decision. So I think it's more of a window than an exact number.
Yeah.
So that's the revenue side. What about the expense side, the amount
Right.
that we need to have covered?
Yeah, so we had three major expenses that we were planning on using that money for. The Station 3 purchase, which is, we had Station 3 and the ladder truck, both around 1.8 million. And then we had 4 additional police vehicles, patrol vehicles, that we were going to use that money for as well.
Do
So
you know what that all sums to?
4.8?
4.8. So so what I'm trying to get, those were expenses that were budgeted from a revenue source that we don't expect to arrive during this calendar year.
That's how it appears at this point, correct?
Okay. Okay.
Mayor Mueller?
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Can we go back? Can we go back to that page again? Sorry.
Which one?
The one that we just had up. Keep
I'm
going.
sorry.
Yes. No. That's yes. Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify because we have the ER&R in our fund loan, which is the 6.95 million. But then we also have the fact that for the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've not been funding ER&R from every department at what we should do. We've been doing it at 50%. Is that correct? So at what point are we going to need to make that component whole? Are we worried about that? Are we just pretending that's not going to be something we're going to think about? To me, that
Yeah.
is a major factor when we're talking about replacement of equipment.
Certainly. Yeah, and that's a priority. That's a high priority with me, but we did make conscious decisions about that in the past, going through those budget process, because at some point you get to that decision point where you need to choose what you're going to fund, and we've done this in the past where we have chosen to retain staff rather than fully fund those equipment replacement charges. So ideally, once we get our revenue streams back up to where they are producing year to year, covering more than what it's costing us, that's when we would build those reserves back up. So we've been, as you're all aware, we're heading into our third year of projected flat or decreasing revenues. My hope is when we're here in a year from now, looking at projected revenues, those are going to be projected to increase 8 to 10% like they have traditionally. And at that point, that would be the budget recommendation that we start putting those full replacement charges back into place and making that ground back up.
That would be in 2027 when we.
Well, or it'll be
sooner.
for budget year 2026, and this is all dependent on what the future brings economically, of course.
So I guess it would be nice to have that number, kind of that running total that we are deferring for the last number of years, and also factor that into when we start to transition from drawing from the general fund to actually contributing to the general fund. Because to me, it sounds nice in 2027 that we might contribute 222,000, but in reality, that either needs to go to our ER&R fund that has been deferred on, or it needs to, I had it in my head and now I've forgotten it because I didn't take notes. It needs to, I'll think of it. Sorry, guys. No.
Our continued labor costs that we aren't able to cover with our current revenues?
Well, sorry. No, that was not actually it.
Okay.
But the fact that the other component is when we start to put money back into the general fund, that's fine, but we're also talking about paying off this loan ahead of time, right? So not taking the full 30 years. So at that point, if we're trying to pay it off of 10 years, we need to have that remaining chunk of change collecting to pay it off. Is that not correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I just want to make the point that while it sounds like we're going to have contribution to the general fund, a lot of that money is kind of spoken for. And it would be good to have a running total.
Well, if you're talking about the 2026 number, the 2027 number, there's a lot of variables there. Like, my hope is more customers would be one big variable, and then, of course, the economy.
Sure. But
two huge variables.
Sure, but we also still have to refund the ER&R, and then also, because we're going to be buying equipment, and then we also need to, in theory, pay off this bond.
Well, in my, I guess my thought process through this is that's why I was recommending a 30-year bond, because that would have the lowest impact on annual cash flow, give us the most flexibility in that, that year-to-year budget process. So yeah, ideally in 10 years we pay the whole 9 yards off. If it doesn't work out, then
we continue. I think I think it's nice to have all of these scenarios lined up, because it sounds a little too good to be true that we're suddenly going to start having like piles of cash to spend on everything. When in reality, we are going to be making ourselves whole after doing a build out and hopefully getting ahead of schedule. So that's all. Wanted to kind of clarify.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Well, I don't think Ms. Shu was showing us piles of cash. She was showing us an $800,000 draw and then a $200,000 draw, which is still, a negative $1 million, and then in the following year 200 plus. But at 200 plus, it takes 5 years. I assume it grows over time. But definitely, Ms. Cleveland McGrath's point about ER&R is a good one. And that's something we've talked about probably every single year. We need to have visibility into ER&R, and we don't get it through the line items in the budget. We just, you can't look at the budget and determine how much deferred revenue we don't have in the ER&R fund. So we really need to, and we've talked about this in the Public Works Committee, we really need to have, we have these pieces of equipment, this is their lifespan, this is how much money we've collected to replace those equipment, and this is when we're going to need, additional money, and this is how much we're on track to achieve. I can't think of a year that I've been here when we've contributed more than 100% to ER&R, and assumedly you have to do that at some point to start to build ER&R back up. So I just think we need to have visibility into it. Now, I am going to assume for our purposes here on the bond that we don't have any pressing ER&R purchases we need to make that we can't fund out of what we already have. Because if we did, then maybe we should borrow even more money. But if we don't, then that's great. We still need that visibility into it for the overall budget process. And then to just break it down and make sure that I'm following this here, we're looking at a $12.5 million bond. We're looking at 6.95 to cover that interfund loan, so we will no longer have our interfund loan on the books, right? And 0.5 in interest for 2025, which I don't quite understand, but maybe somebody could explain at some point. So that leaves $5 million, and that $5 million is maybe just couple $100,000 above those couple of expenses that Mr. Hoagland spoke to. So that covers the whole thing, right? That is kind of what I was looking for when we talked about this last week.
And I think that this slide will help to understand the kind of the full scope of the bond. And both Justin and Alice are here and can help with that as well. Two things I would like to point out is that I think that we need to remember that we intentionally have access fiber internet service as a part of the general fund, which will provide some flexibility as we become more revenue generating than revenue drawing or expenditure drawing in the future, which I think is just important to note. So Justin or Alice, do you want to just walk us through this slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this is just data based on interest rates as of November 8th. We assumed the city would have a AA S&P rating, and we're meeting with the rating agencies tomorrow, This assumes a $12 million project fund deposit and a 30-year amortization. So based on this information, have an estimated par amount of $12.5 million. There's capitalized interest, and that's a fund that that's going to be funded with bond proceeds in order to not have to make an out-of-pocket, basically, principal and interest payment in 2025. The first payments to be made are going to be in 2026, principal and interest payments in 2026. The total debt service about $22 million, average annual debt service about $761,000, and true interest cost of 4.24%. So again, that's based on interest rates as of late last week. And so the bonds are scheduled to we're scheduled to go into the market around December 4th, December 5th. So can't say what interest rates are going to do at that point, but hopefully with the way the labor market is slowing down and the way the Fed is going to be cutting interest rates, looking like they're going to be poised to cut interest rates again in December, based on historical cycles. Hopefully we'll see interest rates start to at least remain stable, if not hopefully trend down. But again, a lot of things can happen between now and the day we go into market. So, but that's basically what we're looking at today.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
Just a couple questions. As we're talking about like the amounts and what amount, I remember the presentation that you gave where we had varying amounts and varying terms and all of that, and we had a very robust discussion around that. I like this plan because, like you said, yeah, we hope to pay it back in 10 years, but as someone who does a lot of lending, sometimes that doesn't happen, and to have the flexibility to do different things in that 30-year period, I think is really smart for us. I also had a question about the slide for 2027, actually for 2027, 2026, and 2025. So when you are estimating those amounts, I know that we talked about a 35% take rate. Are those amounts, and we've done better, we're at 51%, I think it said. Are the amounts that you're putting in there for 2026, 2025, 2026, is that based off of a 35% take rate, or is that based off of, since we're doing better, did we kind of adjust that, or?
So we have a revenue projection sheet that actually breaks it down with the projected installations per week and then any type of cancellations per month. So we have a week-by-week kind of projection of where we expect that will be. We're very conservative as we put that together for the revenue projections.
So are we thinking it's about 35% or more towards the 50%?
It's actually based on actuals. So it's not based on any percentage. It's that as of today, we have 2,558 customers, and by the end of next month, we think that it's going to go up on average 8 a week. And so it's built on actual projected installations.
Okay, and I guess just my other question would be, and everybody is pretty much for the most part keeping the service. Is that kind of what we see? I mean, do we see a?
Yes, there is some churn. So on average, we have 8 to 10 cancellations a month. The majority of them are have sold their house or moving out of the apartment, and that oftentimes the people that are moving into those new buildings or those apartments are starting service the next day. So very, very few are leaving service for another provider.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walters.
Yeah, when Mr. McDougall originally put together the spreadsheets that form the core of the business model for this, he estimated 35% take rate would be good, would be achievable, and would pay for the construction costs over a reasonable period of time. Now we have a higher take rate, substantially higher take rate. We also have higher construction costs, so they kind of balance each other out. For the bond ordinance allows us to go to 13.5 million. Under what circumstance would we do that? Because we're just...
Justin, do you want to speak to that? I think
we're just delegating this authority to Mr. Hoagland to pull the trigger at whatever level he deems appropriate.
Yeah, most likely the bond issue is going to be in that 12.5 million range, give or take maybe 100,000 or so. I'd like to add a lot of cushion in the bond ordinance just to allow a lot of flexibility for the designated representative, who is either going to be Emily or Steve. And so that's why I put in the $1 million cushion. You never know, maybe between now and pricing, maybe some cost of issuance, or maybe you find that you're going to need additional proceeds, or maybe market conditions change. So I just like to add the cushion to allow the flexibility. Highly unlikely we exceed 12.5, 12.6, 12.7 million if everything stays the same as far as the borrowing amount, as far as the project fund. So that's it. And same with the not to exceed true interest cost. I suggested I think we have 5.5% in the ordinance, and right now we're looking at 4.25. Just added an extra 100 basis points of cushion. And all I would say is, so adding that cushion, it just allows the flexibility. If, say, we go into the market and that interest rate is, say, 5%, that doesn't mean Emily or Steve need to move forward with the deal at 5% interest rate. It just allows them that opportunity to make that decision with that extra cushion.
And the way I read the ordinance, it is Steve the finance director who's the designated representative.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. Any members of the public wish to engage in this conversation? Yeah, sure, come on up.
I'm just curious about the bond rating. I heard the gentleman say you're anticipating a AA bond rating. I wonder what it is right now, particularly because you've had to do this interfund loan, and how will that impact things like interest rates?
Justin or Alice, you want to take that?
I'm sorry, I don't know if it froze a little bit. I missed part of the question, but
So if I heard it correctly, it's what is our rating now, and is it affected by our interfund loans?
When the city last issued general obligation bonds, I believe it was 2009, it was a AA rating by S&P, and the interfund loan does not impact the rating. And based on historical financials, just strong financial position, growth in assessed value, growth in the economy, I would anticipate the city maintaining that rating at this point. And we will meet with the rating agencies, with S&P tomorrow.
Great, thank you. All right, council, it's
Mayor
your
Miller?
pleasure. Ms. Moulton.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt, but if there's nothing else to be said, I would move to adopt ordinance 4091 in preparation of a limited tax general obligation bonds to finance our fiber optic network infrastructure construction with an amount not to exceed $13.5 million.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. Young to approve ordinance 4091. Any additional discussion?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
So some of the description of what we're using the money for in the bond ordinance, it is all revolved around the fiber optic project. On some level, we are effectively using the money to pay for those other expenditures that we've already incurred this year, the fire station purchase and the vehicles and the ladder truck. So is there any problem there with the representations that are in the bond ordinance? And
yeah, and maybe Alice could speak to this as well, but I guess, again, back to my way of thinking about this is over the several years that the fiber department has been working its build out, it has used general fund monies, in excess of what we're talking about here. So I don't believe we're in violation of kind of the spirit of these funds, and then putting those back into that general fund operating cash.
On some level, it's all fungible.
So, well, yeah, I would. So I would add that as part of our tax due diligence process and reviewing this with Steve, we'll be looking at all of those expenditures and making sure that those all tie back to a capital expenditure that was made for this purpose. When we include it within the purposes for which the bond proceeds may be used to reimburse the city. So we do know, and Steve has documented, what actual capital expenditures for the fiber program have already been incurred, and those are the ones that will be reimbursable with the bond proceeds.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Mr. Franciac, will you take the vote, please? Oh, sorry, got a motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. Young to approve ordinance 4091. Mr. Franciac.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland-McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you very much for that good discussion, and I will have to say I don't have any prepared remarks. I feel like I should, because this is a long way from our trip down to Sandy And I appreciate council's patience for last year when we put this off, but now that we kind of know what our customer base is, we know what the expenses are, this is a good news story. Yes, there's still challenges with the budget, and I appreciate that discussion, but we're not going to lose our shirt on fiber, I guess, is my basic message. So thanks for the work on this. All right, on to item D, ordinance 4089, setting the city's 2025 property tax levy increase. This is a discussion item with possible action. Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. Actually, I put that on the agenda as possible action. We generally have the two-read rule for our ordinances, and we do have time. This property tax material is due to the county by the end of November. So anyway, you're obviously welcome to waive that two-read rule if you like, but had anticipated that. But this is to for the city to claim a 1% property tax increase over the existing levy. This is the increase that is allowable under the law that council can take advantage of through adoption stating that action. And that's a, pardon me, a 1% increase over the existing levy, which the levy for 2024 is $8,405,509. 1% increase over that is $84,055. So any new construction that gets added to the tax rolls will also be included in the property tax increase next year. The county estimates that to be about $55,000 at this point. But this 1% is what council can affect. So we did talk about this back in October when we had the public hearing on revenue sources. And the current budget does have the 1% property tax assumed, and looking at kind of how this affects a taxpayer, a house that assesses for $750,000 with the current millage we have of $1.34 per thousand, $750,000 house would incur an additional $10.08 in property tax per year for the city levy. So not considering the other property tax levies, but the city portion, 1% on a $750,000 house would be $10 a year. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, or.
All right, council.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
So, taxes. Question for you. I noticed our budget assumes the tax increase. How many years in a row have we voted to increase by 1%?
This is the 18th budget that I've worked on, so I can attest for 18 consecutive years.
So 18 consecutive years.
Prior to that, I am uncertain.
Do you anticipate, if we didn't raise this 1% this year, do you anticipate that it would have a catastrophic event or a catastrophic impact on our budget or revenue?
Catastrophic is probably a pretty strong term.
Scale of 1 to 10. Where would you say it would affect us?
Yeah, so it's $85,000. It's real money, but looking at the overall budget, even just the property tax budget of $8.5 million, probably not be considered material. I guess the one thing I could say about that, though, is this is the one area that City Council can affect directly the city's revenues, and there aren't many other things that Council can do to generate revenue for the city directly.
Well, and just a question. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, we could, under state law, adjust impact fees. I mean, that would be well within, because I guess I just think of, I feel like whenever we have a tax, I am all in favor of approving taxes when our constituents vote on them. And like, for instance, the levy lid lift, which we had a very specific purpose for that tax. It was to help better fund the fire and police. I know that's one of the reasons that Mount Vernon, I think they increased their, after a few years of not taking their 1% increase, I know they took it this year for that purpose. Do we have a specific purpose in mind for this increase, or is it just we'll decide where it goes?
No, well, it's it's part of the general revenues that the city gets, that's in support of the the general operations of the city. There was a mention earlier tonight, staff wage and benefit increases exceed $1.5 million annually. So we have, there are, it would go at a minimum towards trying to meet those additional revenues. The lid lift that you mentioned was I think a great thing for the city. Generated revenues to put an additional 13 public safety staff in place, which is fantastic. But those staff costs will grow 8 to 10% per year now, funded with a revenue source that will grow by 1% if council, adopts the 1% increase. Otherwise, we'll have to find revenues in sales tax, utility tax, other places that, as we've talked about, are currently flat or decreasing the last couple of years.
So it is one of the only places that we can raise money for our city, but it's also one of the only places that we can save money for our constituents.
That's fair statement, yep.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on this one? Members of the public?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
So I really appreciate the figure of using the example of a $750,000 home, that this is an increase of less than $11 a year. If I have a $750,000 home, I can afford $10 and however many cents a year. And the city, as you said earlier, Mr. Hoagland, is pretty broke right now. And I don't think this places an undue burden on our constituents at all. It's related to the value of your home. It's not, it affects you that way. So I am in favor of this increase, and it's $85,000, $84,000, but we need that money, and I think that's fair that we do that.
Right. And again, this is possible action, but as Mr. Hoagland said, if council wants to take action on this tonight, they'd have to waive the 2-read rule.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
The reason that council has always adopted the 1% is because inflation is always, or on average, greater than 1%. So the amount that we levy here with this 1% increase is immediately consumed in a much greater amount, frankly, simply by inflation. When you're launching a rocket or flying an airplane or anything that involves the laws of physics, if you ignore the laws of physics, it catches up with you really quickly. Here, the laws of economics are no less real. We may not have all figured them all out yet, but we are, continuing to work on that. And one thing that we're very certain of is that inflation eats away at our purchasing power. And even though historically it's been around 2%, and it's at 2% or so now, over the last 3 years, it's been closer to 20% cumulative inflation, which has really eaten away at our purchasing power. And then if you look at the amount of healthcare cost inflation and benefit cost inflation and the inflated wages that we need to pay in order to attract people to work at the city of Anacortes because people can't afford to live in the city of Anacortes, these things are not made up by the 1% property tax increase that we take every year. They don't even come close, but we would get even further behind if we weren't taking the 1% property tax increase. Ultimately, that's really not sustainable unless you either have lots of new construction, and if you have lots of new construction, you get lots of additional demand for services, so it may not be a net positive. Or you have lots of new sales tax, which we don't have. So we have always taken the 1% for that reason. It's just we are continually losing ground. We're not gaining ground. And that's very difficult for a lot of our constituents to understand because of the way the property tax system is structured. People think that we are increasing their property tax 1% when we say we are taking this 1% increase, but that's not actually how that works. And so the mechanics are somewhat complicated, but the reality is just staring us in the face all the time. So that's why we always take the 1%, and that's why I'm in favor of doing it now. I'm also perfectly fine doing it next week on our regular schedule. I don't see any need to do it immediately, just as long as we get it done before the end of November.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I think your point's well taken, that people have $750,000 houses, $10 is not a huge increase. I think my bigger point is that I think there are other ways that we can affect the revenues of the city. Or like, again, for instance, earlier this year, we approved a big change from the state allowing 2 ADUs on properties, whether they be owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied, and we didn't look at any kind of impact fee adjustment. There hasn't been any impact fee adjustment in quite some time. So I do think that there are other ways besides taxes that we can affect that, and I would really like to have that discussion at some point, specifically around impact fees. But I do agree that if it's $750,000 house, you know, it's not a big impact for people. I would just encourage us to look at other ways to affect the bottom dollar of the city than just raising taxes.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I think that point is well taken as well, except for the fact that impact fees can't cover the expenses that we're covering with general revenue, including property tax. Impact fees can only be spent on the costs of growth. So that isn't really available to us as a revenue source for the same purpose that property tax is. It certainly would be great if we could pull some lever other than property tax, and the biggest one would be sales tax. We can't just increase the sales tax, but we could somehow get to a point where we are generating more sales tax through a variety. If we were really focused on that, maybe we could affect that outcome. And then there are some other potential revenue sources as well, utility tax, B&O taxes, those kinds of things, which we have really not explored, but they are all taxes. So we're kind of all going to be paying them kind of one way or another. I'm not sure which is better than others. So there's a discussion to be had here, not for impact fees. We can have a discussion about impact fees, but it doesn't fix this problem. It might fix other problems. But in a state where we don't have an income tax, there isn't that lever, which can be more tailored to people who have more ability to pay. But that's not on the table for us. So that's why we keep landing at just taking the 1%, which just is nothing compared to the inflation rate that is consuming it.
All right, I think that was all good discussion, and I think I saw some head nods about bringing it back for next week for council adoption.
Sounds good, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll move on to our final item on the agenda tonight. It's Resolution 3170, Countywide Planning Policies. This is a discussion item with possible action, and I don't think I'll be able to fill the time for you to get your presentation up, but Mr. Coleman will be presenting this one.
Good evening, council, members of the public, mayor. John Coleman, Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development. Again, presenting tonight. This is a long and complicated one to explain. So hopefully you've looked at the agenda bill. I understand that some the people that have read it have said that it's made sense and it's understandable. So without going back to 1990 and explaining the whole purpose of the Growth Management Act, I'll give the abridged version. In part of our regional GMA planning in Skagit County, we've established a framework agreement between the jurisdictions to come up with recommendations for changes to regional actions. So in this case, it's our countywide planning policies, which guide sort of the overall county comprehensive plan, and it includes our projections for population increase and housing increase, excuse me, and jobs growth over a 20-year planning horizon. So right now we're planning out to 2045. The countywide planning policies also talk about other regional issues and how we are just generally the county is going to approach growth. These were hammered out in 2016 and previous years to that. In 2016, we didn't make significant changes to these, and now we're making some significant changes, recommending significant changes, mostly to react to the housing bill and the bills that came from the state regarding housing and population growth. I apologize, I can never remember the specific. Okay, so 1220 for housing and 1181, House Bill 1181 regarding climate change and resiliency. So those made some significant changes to the Growth Management Act. So the CPPs, we proposed some changes to that. If you want me to explain further how the SCOG process works, it's the Technical Advisory Committee, which is basically the planners from each of the jurisdictions get together and make recommendations to the SCOG GMA Steering Committee, which is the Skagit Council of Governments Steering Committee, which is made up of the mayors of the jurisdictions and the 3 county council members. That steering committee makes the recommendation to the county board of commissioners. Just on these specific urban growth area expansions and countywide planning policies, and maybe something else that's not actually involved in this. That was, this process was created to make sure that all of the jurisdictions had a say in these regional issues, whereas back before 2000, maybe some of the jurisdictions didn't have as much weight in this, and the county would do what, the cities at least perceived that the county would run over the cities on this. So this was a way for everybody to really have not only a path to understand how to do these processes, but also to give everybody a more equal share in the process. And so it's been working really well under the framework agreement, at least since I've been involved in regional planning in Skagit County since 2006. So this is the process that we have. The SCOG Steering Committee did make recommendations for updates to the countywide planning policies. The framework agreement says after the steering committee makes that recommendation that each jurisdiction has the ability to, each jurisdiction is supposed to have a public review of it. So it's not real clear about, framework agreement's not terribly clear about what they need to be done. It could have been, we could have brought it to the city council and said, here, this is what's happening, thanks for looking, any public want to comment. We've chosen to, instead of making it a pared down process, we've chosen to bring it to the Planning Commission for their review, and the Planning Commission in our case here has made some minor changes, recommendations to recommended changes, and then we're bringing it now to the City Council with those Planning Commission recommended changes for your approval via a resolution. And so the resolution is supporting the countywide planning policy updates. And the motion that we've penned for the council is and accepting the accepting the Planning Commission's recommendations. And those recommendations are on the last page of that. There's 2 pages, and hopefully you got it in color because it shows the underlined in black is what the proposed changes were that was approved by SCOG's GMA Steering Committee, and the ones that are underlined in red or stricken through in red are changes recommended by the Planning Commission.
Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I didn't get the benefit of the Planning Committee discussion on this because I was at my class teaching about the Growth Management Act, but we didn't cover this. Can you tell us a little bit about why the Planning Commission recommended some of the changes that they did? It looks like they struck the Department of Commerce in a couple of different places and also found at least one typo in the proposal. So what else? Is there anything else that I'm missing here? And why strike Department of Commerce?
There wasn't a vigorous debate about that or discussion, but if you're willing, the person that recommended that is actually in the audience, and if that person is willing to speak, that is an opportunity. If you're willing.
Planning Commissioner Miller, you're welcome to come on up. Helping us out.
To the best of my recollection, the reason we took that out was because there's good data that shows population growth, but there's not good data from the Department of Commerce showing housing by AMI. So just for clarity on where we got the information, I guess.
I thought they do provide that. I thought they break it down by AMI.
They do, but there's not data behind it. It looks more arbitrary. If you look at how they came up with those numbers, for example, population in, as I recall, in the lowest 2 AMI areas, that growth is more than 50%, projected to be more than 50% of the total growth in Anacortes, and there is no historical data that verifies that. And so...
Okay. Well, and that gets maybe to another question that I had, because the information provided by the Department of Commerce is at the county level, and then the county divvies it up among the, the county, lowercase c, the regional group, divvies it up amongst the jurisdictions, right? So how did we get to?
Well,
go ahead.
The Office of Financial Management provides the population projections and the population projections and the employment projections. The Housing for All planning tool, the HAPT, which is a spreadsheet that has all sorts of calculations built into it. I believe that is provided by the Department of Commerce, and that's where the housing numbers come from and how that is moved around. One of the things that isn't clear in it, because there's multiple layers to it and multiple options, is they build in the chair and the Planning Commission chair mentioned that there's more than 50 more population in that below 50 AMI. That is not just growth, that's to accommodate, those housing figures are to accommodate a deficiency in the existing housing in that level. So the housing information is kind of on a separate track than the population, in that it's looking at not just growth, but it's also looking at historic housing and what type of housing is available.
Okay, but the tool, the Housing for All planning tool that Commerce provides, gives us only the county level data, right? It doesn't break it down by city?
Once we plug in it's been a while since I've looked at this. The way I recall is once we plug in the population allocations that the county has given for each of the jurisdictions, then it manipulates the housing numbers from using that information instead of just the very basic medium level OFM numbers that the county has adopted.
Okay, so my question is, at what geographic scale it then breaks that down?
Yes.
Yes,
So,
what?
So the HAPT tool, it's really, I'm not an expert in it. I'd have to get somebody from Commerce that can explain it. But we put in the numbers for our projected population for each jurisdiction into it. And then it knows what the deficit is in each jurisdiction, and I think that's probably a base assumption based on the number of AMI, below AMI, certain AMIs in the county overall, and then divvies it up.
Okay, so my ultimate question here was going to be how we arrived at the figures that are shown in the attachment to the CPPs here, the growth allocations that show Anacortes is to get these amounts of housing units for the various AMI brackets. And are you saying that that comes directly from the tool?
So first we divvied it up for population, and then we put those population numbers into the HAPT, which is the Housing for All Planning tool, which is the spreadsheet that has the calculations, and that turns out the housing population, the housing projected needs.
In per jurisdiction, per city?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So then these numbers that we have in front of us are not up for debate because they come from the tool? Is that the idea? They are the revised numbers, right? We were looking at different numbers before, but then the rural area got revised, right?
Correct.
But all of this is from the tool? The tool is telling us which?
The housing figures come from the tool, yes.
Okay, all right. It does seem to me that the deletion of the words from the Department of Commerce maybe doesn't really get at the discrepancy because it could simply be read kind of the same way without those words in it. But otherwise, I don't necessarily have any edits or changes to the Planning Commission's recommendation, except that I think the Planning Commission should have gone further and said, you just put too many words in this document. I mean, I've had this problem with the CPPs for a long time. They just restate so much of the state law that is state law anyway. The meat, the allocations are the thing that have got to be in it. And they're at the back on page 30. So I don't have a problem with giving our assent to this based on your representations here about how we've arrived at these numbers. They don't strike me as necessarily the right numbers, but maybe not too far off. But if they came from the tool, then I guess that's what we're left with.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I kind of appreciated the removing from the Department of Commerce because I felt like it kind of was suggesting a desire for a little bit more local control over managing the growth of and our development. So at least that's how I was kind of reading the changes, and I like that. I like that it comes back to the Planning Commission and the Council for review. You know, I felt like the recommendations kind of reflected consideration of public effort and kind of balancing growth with preserving the character of our city. So I liked the changes.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I'm fine with leaving provided by the Department of Commerce in. I don't really see the total point of taking it out. The climate change and resiliency part about adding seek to adapt to and mitigate the effects of a changing climate, I think it's required by law for the comprehensive plan and policies to actually adapt, not to just try to adapt. I think that that's kind of the language, that strong language is what we're looking for. That, like when we do our critical areas ordinance, it's like shall, it's not like, oh, we're gonna try to. So I would personally not put the seek to in. And the Appendix B, the planning commissions and city councils will have the opportunity to review and comment on the initial population, employment, and housing allocations prior to their submission to the GMASC. Like you said, they don't really clarify, it sounds like, what the review process is, but my understanding is that it's not our job as the city council, for example, we don't have the authority to argue with the allocations and say, well, we don't really think these numbers are right. That's out of our lane. I feel like that's not our job. So I would not include that either. I mean, I think that's not what we do. That's not our role here. So I wouldn't put that in either. I think that's overreach. And that's it.
Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. I would agree with taking out Seek 2 in Goal 14. It is required for us to do as much as we can to plan for climate resilience and climate adaptation and changes in greenhouse gas emissions. That's the only thing that I would specifically recommend updating, though.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I think I see other council members' point about Seek 2. I think if we left it in or left it out, it probably wouldn't matter too much on the ground. We do have to achieve these things, but what the language in the CPPs is, I'm not sure will drive it so much as the statute. Also, you know, we can make these recommendations and these changes may not get made. However, Ms. Moulton's point about the change to Appendix B, that planning commissions and city councils will have the opportunity to review and comment on the initial population, employment, and housing allocations prior to their submission to the GMA steering committee. Aren't we already past that point? I mean, that has already occurred, right? The steering committee has already voted to accept these their initial round of allocations.
Correct.
So unless that is a different section that I'm not tracking, it seems like that's kind of surplusage because it's, at least for this round of GMA updates, it's already happened.
Correct. And it may be in conflict with the framework agreement. I'm not entirely clear on that yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, where does council want to go with this?
Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
Serious question. Is this an adopt tonight or a two-read rule?
Discussion, possible action. It's a resolution. There is not a two-read rule, but it's the staff presented as possible action.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Clutha McGrath.
I appreciate the work that Planning Commission did on this, taking it seriously and putting, you know, it's in front of them. The goal is for them to put in their feedback and then provide it to us. So I appreciate the letter or the memo with this work. Reading through the documents, understanding that this is still just a recommendation to the whatever acronym we're working with on this project, the countywide planning policies for the, not SCOG, but the GMATAC advisory committee. I appreciate the suggestions. I think that moving forward, I would say, you know, the urban growth with the green space, comma, sure. The removal of Department of Commerce. I think everyone who even just scratches the surface of how these estimates are derived can see that there are real issues with it, but at the same time, this is our best benchmark for understanding area median income and what that income bandwidth is for appropriate housing costs. So while it's not perfect, it's the best we have, and at least it's consistent year to year and across the state. So my inclination is to leave the Department of Commerce references in those locations. Seek 2, we've got to do goal 14. I don't think we should add that. I think Appendix B was just addressed with Mr. Walters. And then that is it. So I guess my thought is let's move this forward today with the suggestion of the green space correction, and then also there are areas that need to be corrected for the Growth Management Act Technical Advisory Committee. Is that correct, Mr. Coleman? Right? Those need to be corrected? Maybe, maybe not.
They could be. The
Okay.
GMA TAC is more accurate than Planners Group.
Okay. So I guess, unless someone else has something to say, I would be willing to, with those corrections that I just said, make a motion to adopt Resolution 3170 supporting the county-wide planning policies as adopted by the SCOG GMA Steering Committee with amendments that I just stated.
Second.
Mayor Miller?
Hold on just a second. Motion by Ms. Cleveland McGrath and a second by Mr. Young to adopt the Resolution 3170 from the GMAC committee with 2 changes, green space and the other one I didn't catch. Mr. Coleman, you help me out with that one.
The second to last bullet, throughout the CPPs, replace Planners Committee with GMA TAC to properly reference the name of the committee.
There we go. Okay, Mr. Fantini, thank you.
This is a serious question, like not trying to be difficult. It's been said that it's not our job to push back against the Department of Commerce and the numbers that the Department of Commerce decides to put in there. So whose job is that? That's a genuine question. I was just wondering do we know who's...
Mayor Miller?
All right, Mr. Walters.
I'll take one for the team here. So we start with the population employment projections that come from the state, that come from the Office of Financial Management. And those are provided in a range. So we could select anywhere within that range. I'm not sure where we did select.
We chose medium, just a skosh under, I think.
Just a skosh under?
Under.
So just a little bit under medium. And that has implications. I think that's typically what we have done over the last several iterations.
The last 2 iterations were medium.
Yeah, because if you don't plan for enough population and enough growth, you may or may not get that growth, but you will get higher prices if you see that same level of demand. But so the start off with that, and then we put into the tool all of this information about which population number we've picked. And by we, we're talking about the GMA TAC or the GMA Steering Committee?
The GMA TAC then does a bunch of work to divvy it up, divvy the population and employment up. And we use a consultant that built several models for us that we reviewed and chose the most likely ones and reviewed that with the planners group, also known as the GMA TAC. and presented that to the GMA Steering Committee, which is the mayors and the commissioners.
And then that tool has multiple allocation methods among the cities and other urban growth areas?
Yes.
Did we use any particular one of those 3 allocation tools or methods?
We're required to use the HAP. That is in the statute.
Oh, right, but I mean that there are 3 allocation methods, 3 tabs in the.
Yeah, and it's a lot more complicated than that. There's sort of a couple of pathways within each of those tabs.
Yeah. So there is some amount of discretion here, but at the county level, that all starts at choosing within that range that comes from OFM. I think the bigger question, maybe one of the Planning Commission recommendations gets at this, is how does an individual city or individual city council affect a different outcome, because it's a decision made among all of them and the county, and it's kind of already on a path.
And the county technically makes the decision on these things. We've developed a process in which the cities get a say.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
I also think that it's worth reiterating that this is just projections. This is not actually going to get built. The city, the county, the state doesn't have the money to build all of these units. It is just trying to identify the scope and scale of need in these different bandwidths, so that when it comes to the Planning Commission and our comprehensive plan, that we are aware that there is that need for that 0 to 20, that 20 to 40, the 40 to 60 bandwidth, and how do we thoughtfully make code and do our comprehensive plan to consider all of those different folks that live in our community that may not be as vocal and have the ability to come and sit and talk to us and be at all of our meetings. So I think that it's really a planning document. It's not something that is set in stone that's going to get built. And that's year over year, comprehensive plan over comprehensive plan. All we can do is hope that the communication between the county and our various cities, we all work together so that we as all put in what we can to address the issue. So I mean, that's the thing. That's why I'm a little bit more willing to just move it forward, is because this is not something that we have to do, but it is a benchmark for us to use moving forward in the next 10 years.
Okay, so I still have a motion on the table by Ms. Cleveland McGrath and a second by Mr. Young to approve for 3170 with 2 changes that I'm not going to try to, but it's in the record.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
To tag on to Ms. Cleveland McGrath a little bit, in addition to just being the planning document, we are committing to making sure that our zoning code allows for these units to be built, even though they may not ultimately get built. So I think that's an important point. And then the numbers themselves are beyond what I can critique or any of us can critique without really digging into this and kind of redoing all the work. So I think that's why you don't see us talking about the numbers themselves. Also, these are a new set of numbers. I had looked at the previous set of numbers, and it seems to me on a gut level they are not too far off, simply on a gut check, even though I don't necessarily have data to support that at my fingertips. Other people do through the tool and through the projections. So I'm going to be relying on that expert advice there.
All right, maybe that sounded like a call for the question. Any more comments or a call for the vote? Mr. Franciac?
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. No further business before the council. I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Have a good night.